Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something really quite unique, maybe even unsettling, from urban history. It's the story of the Trockenwohner.
The drying dwellers.
Exactly. It sounds almost poetic, doesn't it? But the reality was, well, pretty grim for many families in German cities back then.
Absolutely. In simple terms, it meant people living, just temporarily, mind you, in brand new houses that were still damp, still wet from construction.
Right. It gives you this stark, immediate picture of a very specific kind of urban struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to really unpack the historical context. How did this even start? We want to understand the lives of the people involved, the Trockenwohners themselves.
And explore what this whole phenomenon tells us about bigger issues in German history, social issues, housing.
Exactly. Hopefully you'll walk away with a real shortcut to understanding this often overlooked piece of the past.
Mm.
Okay, so let's start right there. What exactly was a Trockenwohner? How did this peculiar arrangement even come about? Because it does sound like something you'd read in a novel, not real life.
Well, the term itself, Trockenwohner, or sometimes you'll see Trockenbewohner, it literally means drying dweller.
Okay.
And it described people, mostly working class folks, proletarians, who property speculators allowed to live in newly built apartment blocks. These were the famous Mietskasernen, the tenement houses. And they could live there either rent-free or for, a really minimal rent, but only for a limited time until all that dampness from the construction had basically evaporated, until the building was dry enough, habitable enough for regular, full-paying tenants to move in.
Wow. Okay. But why were new buildings so damp? I mean, damp enough that you needed people to, well, live the dampness out. That's the part that seems so strange today.
Yeah, it really boils down to the construction methods back then. See, they weren't using cement mortar like we mostly do now.
No.
No, they used lime mortar, which was much cheaper. But the thing with lime mortar is as it hardens, it actually releases a lot of water. It's part of the chemical process.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so a typical house built with lime mortar needed quite a while to dry out properly. We're talking maybe, 3 months or so before it was really considered habitable.
3 months, okay.
So the drying dwellers, they served a really practical purpose for the landlords, even if it was unintentional on the dwellers' part. Just by being there, living there, they generated body heat.
Right, heating the space just by existing.
Exactly. And this is the really fascinating bit. The carbon dioxide in their breath actually helped the lime mortar harden faster.
Get out. Seriously.
Seriously, CO2 reacts with the lime. So they were, in effect, involuntary human dehumidifiers and mortar hardeners.
That is chilling. The city's poorest, their very breath used as a building material.
Wow. And the name itself, Trockenwohner, you mentioned it has an interesting origin.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't some official bureaucratic term, at least not at first. It seems to have been coined back in 1863.
By who?
By a satirical magazine called Kladderadash. It was very influential, known for its sharp social critique.
A satirical magazine coined it. That's perfect.
Isn't it? They jokingly defined it, applying to proletarians who are allowed by property speculators to live in their newly built, recently completed houses without paying rent until all the damp has disappeared.
Wow, so they nailed it, even in jest.
They did, and the term caught on fast. It popped up in caricatures, social commentary. People even started using it figuratively for, public figures who were maybe in a temporary or uncomfortable position. It clearly struck a chord.
Okay, so that's the technical side, the why and the word's origin. But behind the practicality for landlords and the dark humor of the satirists, there's the human story. What did it actually mean for the people who became Trockenwohner? Well, it tells you a lot about the social reality of the time. This was during Germany's big industrial boom, the late 19th century, the Wilhelminian period. Cities were exploding.
Right, huge migration to urban centers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you had this massive new urban working class, but housing just couldn't keep up. There was a constant chronic shortage, and rents were incredibly high, often exploitative.
But for many people,
For many, drying, living, becoming a Trockenwohner was literally the only thing keeping them off the streets. It was an alternative, however grim, to homelessness.
and these were the poorest people.
Often the poorest of the poor, yes. And the bitter irony is sometimes these were the very same construction workers who had built the houses. They'd finish the job, maybe get laid off because of bad weather, and then find themselves forced to live in the damp shells they'd just erected.
That's Incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
So what were the conditions actually like inside these places? It sounds difficult, but can you paint a picture?
Oh, the downsides were huge. I mean, first and foremost, the damp. Living constantly in that damp, cold environment was terrible for health.
I can only imagine. Respiratory problems.
Absolutely. Respiratory illnesses, rheumatism, probably mold issues we'd recognize today, just generally unhealthy. And then there was the instability.
Because they had to move.
Every 3 months or so, yeah.
Mm.
As soon as one place was dry, they were out, needing to find another new damp building. It's this constant disruptive cycle.
Uprooted constantly.
Constantly. And add to that, these families usually had nothing. No furniture to put in these empty flats, and often no fuel or money for heating.
So damp, cold, and empty.
Exactly. It made already awful conditions even more brutal, especially in winter.
Given how desperate it sounds, I imagine there must have been a social stigma attached. Was being a Trockenwohner looked down upon?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. It was seen as a sign of utter destitution. While the landlords saw it as pragmatic and the poor saw it as a last resort, society generally viewed it with disdain.
Is there evidence of that?
Yes, quite clearly. Think about the famous novelist Theodore Fontaine. In his novel Effie Briest from 1894, there's a really telling line.
What does it say?
A character, discussing whether someone of status might live in such conditions, says something like, health considerations alone will prevent it. And besides, this is the key part, a privy councillor is not a drying dweller.
Wow. Stark class distinction right there.
Absolutely crystal clear. It shows these conditions were considered completely unsuitable, unthinkable for anyone with any social standing. And you saw it in caricatures, too.
Like the one from Kladderadatsch.
Well, that one coined the term, but later ones, too. There's one from another satirical paper, Der R. Jacob, around 1904. It shows a landlord basically shrugging off a tenant's complaints about the dampness and their health.
How so?
He just sort of flippantly says something like, don't worry, I get a discount with the doctor. It really highlights the indifference, the exploitation baked into the whole system.
That's chilling.
Ugh.
So this practice, it starts with, lime mortar and housing shortages, but it clearly tapped into something deeper. How did it become this cultural critical metaphor that important thinkers started using?
That's one of the most fascinating parts, how it jumped from this very literal, grim reality into the realm of metaphor and social critique.
Who helped make that leap?
Well, visually, you have someone like Heinrich Zill, the Berlin illustrator.
Ah, Zill, yes.
Yeah.
Famous for his drawings of working-class Berlin.
Exactly. Right around the turn of the century, he drew the world of the Trockenwohner. His sketches showed these cramped, damp interiors, the poverty. He brought their reality into public view in a really powerful visual way.
So he documented it.
Documented and humanized it. And then you had playwrights, too. Oscar Wagner wrote a play in 1893 actually called Die Trockenwohner, The Drying Dwellers.
A whole play about it.
Yes. And the stage directions themselves paint a picture. Things like basement flat, very primitive, with damp walls and broken floorboards. It put the grimness right there on the stage.
So art and theater brought awareness. But you mentioned philosophers and major publicists picking it up, like Karl Kraus and Walter Benjamin. How did they use the term?
They took it a step further. They saw Trockenwohner not just as a person in a damp flat, but as a symbol for aspects of modern life itself.
Okay, how so?
Karl Kraus, the Viennese satirist and writer, was quite taken with it. In 1912, he wrote something profound. Ever since geniuses have existed, they have been placed in time as drying dwellers.
Wow. What do you think he meant by that?
It suggests maybe that truly creative or forward-thinking people are often put in uncomfortable, temporary positions by society. They're sort of drying out the space for future inhabitants, enduring hardship for the sake of progress, perhaps. He also used it to contrast Vienna and Berlin, describing life as being dry dwellers of dilapidated houses.
A sense of decay, of making do in imperfect conditions.
Exactly. And Walter Benjamin, who was influenced by Kraus, ran with the metaphor too.
Benjamin, the philosopher and cultural critic.
Yes. In the 1930s, he used it in really evocative ways. He wrote about modern citizens living in spaces that have been left purely for dying, dry dwellers of eternity. Very bleak.
Goodness, that's heavy.
It is. He even described Charlie Chaplin, the tramp figure, as the drying dweller of the new world, the new playground created by cinema.
Chaplin, how does that connect?
Maybe seeing Chaplin's character as someone adapting, surviving in a new, strained, sometimes hostile environment, the modern, mechanized world that film was depicting.
Yeah.
The Trockenwohner metaphor captured that sense of of transience, alienation, maybe resilience in uncomfortable new spaces.
So it really evolved from a specific housing problem into this lens for looking at broader human struggles, especially within cities and modernity.
Precisely. It became shorthand for precariousness, for being on the margins, for inhabiting spaces not quite ready or perhaps never meant for permanent comfort.
And writers continued to explore the literal reality, too. You mentioned Hans Fallada.
Yes, even much later in a novel published in 1953, but looking back at the turn of the century era in Berlin's new suburbs, Fallada vividly described this situation. It shows how deeply this practice was embedded in the experience of rapid urbanization in Germany.
So thinking about Fallada's depiction and everything else we've discussed, how does this whole Trockenwohner phenomenon reflect those bigger themes? Housing crises, poverty, urban neglect, social policy in that period of industrializing Germany.
Well, it starkly underscores how basic needs like shelter intersect with economic forces. The intense pressure for housing, combined with the drive for profit by developers using the cheapest methods, created this niche of exploitation.
A niche filled by the most vulnerable.
Exactly. It highlights the failures or perhaps the deliberate neglect of social policy to protect the poorest. It shows the human cost when development outpaces social infrastructure and regulation. It's a really potent example of precarious living conditions born from specific historical and economic pressures. And it certainly left a deep mark on Germany's urban history and, as we've seen, its cultural memory, too.
It really did. This whole deep dive has been fascinating. We've gone from, the simple definition of Trockenwohner, drying dwellers, to the really harsh realities these people face. And then how this term just exploded outwards, becoming this powerful metaphor used by writers and thinkers to talk about modernity, alienation, all sorts of big societal issues.
It really shows how sometimes the most specific, almost obscure historical details can shine a light on huge, enduring challenges.
Absolutely. It's a testament to that.
And maybe that leaves us with something for you, the listener, to think about. Considering this whole Trockenwohner phenomenon, what does it really tell us about the hidden costs, the human costs, that often come with rapid urban growth?
Mm.
And maybe what does it suggest about the challenges of housing affordability, of social neglect that still, maybe in different ways, but still persist in cities all over the world today?